What are you actually asking a partner channel to do? Is you're asking them to sell for you. Let's be really clear about what a partner channel is. It's an extension of your sales business. And if you don't think of it that way, then you're going to get it very, very wrong. When it comes to that sort of level of engagement, if you don't fully understand their workflows in a language that they need to hear from you, you're just a tech salesperson trying to flog product. So we brought in partner consultants. 95% of them were ex-accountants that could articulate the journey using Xero rather than a salesperson selling the benefits of Xero.
And yeah, I can imagine that in itself, by having such a deep understanding of the accountants and their workflows, really helps you to build that trust, because at the end of the day, it's a bit different to like managing a salesperson versus managing a partner, because they're not really responsible for driving sales and revenue for your business. Welcome back to another episode of Growth Unlocked. I'm your host, Kieran. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, David Bell, who spent over 2 decades in finance and technology, including 4 years as the EGM of global partner sales at Xero, where he really helped to scale one of the most sophisticated partner ecosystems in SaaS. He's since moved on to the COO seat at MGI Plus More, where he focused on what smarter businesses do and look like in practice. But today he's doing something which is pretty unique and special. And David and I have been in contact for quite some time. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation today, when we're going to talk a little bit about their partner-led playbook, go-to-market strategy, and sprinkle in a little bit of AI to know what the future of go-to-market could look like. So David, thanks a lot for joining us.
Great to be here, Kieran. Thanks a lot for asking me to be on board.
Pleasure. Let's get stuck into it.
Cool.
So, David, we're at a point, I guess, where like fundamentally AI is changing a lot of things, right? Like how buyers are doing research, how sellers are even engaging, and how partnerships get activated. I guess from where you sit with your unique perspective, having seen this across multiple businesses and over many, many decades, and having also scaled one of arguably the most successful go-to-market motions with partnerships with Xero. What do you think go-to-market actually looks like in, say, 3 to 5 years? And what does that mean to executives and founders that are building their motions now?
It's a super interesting question. I'm not even sure we can bend our head around what 3 to 5 years might look like, to be honest with you. There are some pretty extreme versions of what the market might look like. Where the reality lands is certainly going to be an interesting journey. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I can predict what 3 to 5 years looks like, but I'll certainly talk about some of the real areas of change and direction that I see occurring. So let's talk AI first. My view is that AI is going to compress the journey. It's going to allow for a more insightful lead generation journey, as long as you've got the data, and we'll come to that in a minute. So from a lead gen perspective, I think it's going to amplify the lead gen perspective and get to a more defined qualification stage within the sales journey earlier, and so that by the time you potentially bring a human into the loop, it will be a more qualified lead. And so that compression of that lead generation, early discovery, knowing more about your customer, understanding a lot of the dynamics of how they operate, is going to be broader, faster, and deeper through the AI journey, which will help you potentially scale faster. So I can really see that happening. There is no doubt that AI, in certain instances, probably will get to the point, or will get to the point, that it will be able to do end-to-end B2B sales. And for certain customers and for certain people, they'll want that. And for certain businesses, that will help them scale faster. However, I still believe that there is a version of the partner channel that we used, which relies on humans in the loop. So that's kind of where my initial thoughts will play. But if you want to make that happen well, there is one critical factor that I think that cannot be ignored. If you're going to take this data-driven AI type led journey, having a really crisp understanding of who your customer is, what the data points are that really make the difference, really understanding their own personal decision-making journey that will get to a yes, is more than critical. I think that AI or data-driven sales journeys could end up actually making you slower if you end up with um, inaccurate inputs around that decision making process from your side as the people looking to scale. If you don't understand their sales journey, if you don't understand their buying journey, if you really don't understand the data that makes a difference in that, I think you'll go slower. And I think you'll waste money, time, and energy. And I think you'll actually potentially look stupid in front of the customer. And so my perspective is be really careful about what you do. Um, and you must understand exactly why they will buy, but also really importantly, why won't they buy your product? And everyone gets caught up in their own hype around how good their product is, and then how awesome the AI journey could be, and get up caught up in the technical hype. The adoption curve of all of this is always slower than not.
Yeah, it's a really great perspective, and I think the fundamentals never go away, right? Doesn't matter, like, if we've got AI or technology or whatever is kind of the thing at this point in time. Those fundamentals around understanding your ideal customer profile and making sure that you're actually spending time with them is really important. And one of the big things that I notice with like clients that we work with is like they might have their a general understanding of their ICP, or it might have been defined or documented a couple of years ago, but that does need to evolve and does often need to change over time. I think it's not necessarily like a static thing that should necessarily be changing, and then also I think the other part is making sure that your go-to-market teams, particularly sales, are actually spending time with the ICP. It's really tempting for businesses to generate, a lot of leads through different demand channels and have their salespeople just having conversations. When, if you actually did an analysis of the deals that you've got in pipeline that match your ICP, whether they're say like high, medium, or low fit, that'd be pretty scary, I think, for a lot of CROs and business leaders to actually start to look at that data.
I couldn't agree more. You're starting to get into two particular points of the distraction of being busy by having lots of information. You think your pipeline's looking really healthy when actually it's just full, and therefore you get busy. And so it's if you're going to take this digital journey, the benefit is being really accurate versus getting a lot. And you really will end up distracting your team by having something that doesn't match your ICP. What I've seen quite a lot of recently is people not understanding what needs to go into a digital ICP journey, and so you don't bring buying characteristics and human traits in very easily into a digital journey. And so my background being in the accounting partner channel in particular, but if I even go back to my banking days and the businesses that we spoke to there, but let's stick with accountants. Accountants are a really particular type of people. Their decision making process is very nuanced, and it's not strictly obvious towards the initial benefits. There are other things that matter to them, and those you can't bring through very easily into a digital buying journey. And if you don't appreciate and understand them from an ICP perspective, you're going to get a lot of false flags when it comes to potential leads and opportunities.
Hmm. Okay. Do you mind elaborating on that and expanding? So, like from a practical perspective, if you were a go-to-market leader, how do you navigate that?
But that's the skill and the complexity, and that's why I still believe humans need to be in the loop, right? And so, and I think humans will always be in the loop. It's why the kids are going back to vinyl and that sort of experience aspect versus complete digital journeys. They'll always be digital natives, the new kids, but they're getting something that they're not getting out of the digital experience by going back to vinyl. I think the sales journey will always benefit from a human in the loop in a partner led journey. All right, and so that concept of where the intersection between partner led, sales led, and product led, I think, is a really interesting place. And understanding what the human emotion needs to be satisfied for an accountant to buy or a partner to buy, because they're your distribution channel. Let's be very clear. You're bringing them aboard as a distribution channel, and with Xero in particular, um, we established really early days their role as the trusted entity within the ecosystem that we were looking to enter. and at a level of trust that we couldn't get through any B2C or a direct channel, very better language in the B2B market. We couldn't build that trust at a pace that would get through the emotional decision making process of an accountant. So they were critical. So we needed to understand them and their operating workflows deeply. So we hired accountants. The partner channel, the salespeople were significantly supported by what we call partner consultants or PCs. They're effectively our technical support team within the sales journey, and they helped us understand those nuances of decision making.
Interesting. So you're saying that your sales team or like part of the go-to-market team were actually like ex-accountants or people that had been in that space for quite some time?
Yeah, absolutely. Back to understanding the needs in a partner channel. So what are you actually asking a partner channel to do? Is you're asking them to sell for you. Let's be really clear about what a partner channel is. It's an extension of your sales business. And if you don't think of it that way, then you're going to get it very, very wrong. So the product needs to be able to answer to that. The sales journey needs to answer to that. And the partnership strategy needs to answer to that. So the three things are really important. They're individually defined and they need to act as an ecosystem in the partner channel. And so when it comes to that sort of level of engagement, if you don't fully understand their workflows in a language that they need to hear from you, you're just a tech salesperson trying to flog product. And so, and even a digital journey won't be able to answer those nuances. They will want to see you answer it. So we brought in partner consultants, as we called them. I'd suggest 95% of them were ex-accountants that could articulate the journey using Xero rather than a salesperson selling the benefits of Xero. Quite different.
Mm. And yeah, I can imagine that that in itself, by having such a deep understanding of the accountants and their workflows, really helped you to build that trust. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's a bit different to, you know, like managing a salesperson versus managing a partner, because you know they're not really responsible for driving sales and revenue for your business, right? Like they don't wear a quota like a salesperson would. So a lot of this is through building trust and influence with that person, ideally. So you know there is this relationship that they feel like they're part of your team.
Completely. And so we had small quotas on the partner consulting team, but they were fundamentally non-quota correct. They were seen as for better phrase, support, but they were way more than that. They were the people that validated Xero with the accounting and our partner channel that built the trust because we spoke the language and we definitively showed we understood. And that even went back and through into banking. If I look back at the whole banking stage, same thing, but it's very much around clearly demonstrating you understand. When you're asking someone to take on a technology like Xero, you're asking them to effectively rip out the guts of their operating model and workflows and put in something new. That is not a small decision. It's life changing, but it also can be life ending. And so when you get it wrong, the cost isn't necessarily to you. It's an asymmetric cost benefit, and the risk sits with the accountant. It doesn't sit with the technology because you can always move on to another person in the channel. But to them, it can be life ending. It's very significant decision making process. So if you do not have yourself lined up to that, they won't buy.
I can imagine that there was profound benefits and impact on Xero as a company by really nailing this partner-led motion. I mean, like even thinking about like cost per acquisition, retention, the moat that it builds for the business. Like even when I speak to 90% of companies in Australia, they're all using Xero, and New Zealand, and I'm sure there's a lot of penetration in other markets. It seems like that motion was extremely impactful on the success of Xero. So is there anything you could maybe talk to around that, you know, in terms of, I guess, the intentionality, firstly, around making that call as a leadership team to say that, you know, we're going to be a partner led motion first? And then what were the other benefits that the business saw?
It was I joined once it was established. So I joined, when Xero was actually over 10 years old. We were still definitely in the scaling phase of the business. We'd gone from startup to through scaling. I caught back end of scaling, almost moving into enterprise. Um, but the simple thing about the partner channel, and it's where Rod was so brilliant, and people that I've seen, others that I'm working with, and others that are using partner channels, is where you understand the buying decisions and where you want to get to really clearly, and trust as the starting point. We did not, as a software company and as effectively a disruptor, we didn't have the trust with the business community, and the business community also didn't know they needed this. Um, I suppose opportunity, and that's the problem when you're bringing new stuff out into new markets, is that to try and change the mindset of business owners at scale is really, really hard, and to educate them. And most people still just go and check their balance in the bank account. The receipts go into the glove compartment of the ute. You're still getting that today, and yet we've had receipt capture for how long, right? So it's such a slow change at scale into the business owner's mindset if you're trying to get there to build your company so you can carry on capital your capital funding growth trajectory, all of that. You can't achieve that without somebody being really trusted to make the decision for you. So finding the right person to trust, which was the accountant, was superb. Let me just go where that went wrong first before I go to some of the benefits. The assumption that Xero had into the States was the accountant was the trusted advisor. In Commonwealth countries, it is. In the States, it's the lawyer. And so that was an interesting pivot that we had to make into the States. And you'll find that the States had to go far more direct. And we had a far more intensive journey in the States, which is why it's taken so much longer, of how we acquired business in that, because of that differential. That trust coefficient was just so much lower for the accountant in the United States versus a lawyer. Whereas you go to British Commonwealth countries of old, that's the other way around. So that's where we got it slightly wrong and had to pivot. Moving to the benefits of what they deliver, that's very simple. They are the decision maker in the software that is used to do your annual accounts and do management accounting. The business owner very rarely gets that decision making rights. Even if you did persuade the decision maker, the business owner to do it, if one business owner comes back to an accountant that has 1,000 customers, do you think the accountant's going to change their software for the one person that's migrated? No, right? So the accountant becomes the wall um, to a growth as well as the opportunity. And so going in that way, where they become the advocate, they become the person that makes the decision to change. They also then migrate the customer for you, so they become your onboarding specialists. They implement, and then they support. So when the business owner goes, I don't know how to do this, who do they call? Do they call Xero, or do they call the accountant? They call the accountant. And so they became such an extension of our cost base for a very little return, realistically, for not the biggest return, through some of the partner pricing structures that we had in place and benefits that we could give them.
Yeah, I love it. And David, so like moving forward to like where you are today around the consulting work that you're doing,
Yeah.
I'd love to get some insights around that. So like when you're working with a company and a leadership team, and like all businesses, they're looking for growth. They're trying to understand what channels can they use, which go to market motions are going to really help them to kind of take them to the next phase. How do you evaluate that in terms of thinking about, okay, like this business actually is maybe better suited or not so well suited to a partner motion? In generally, like what's your sort of like first principles thinking, or like do you have a framework around that in terms of which businesses can really benefit through partnerships? And I know that like there's all these different ways that you can think about it, but how do you think about that when it comes to go-to-market motions and where businesses should be considering partnerships as a key driver within their growth?
I genuinely just look to where the decision making process gets actually done. And so you can follow your journey around. So if you clearly understand your product and you clearly understand what it is going to be used for and who is the person that really uses it and gets the benefit initially, that's where I look for that decision making process. So in Xero, it wasn't the business owner initially. It was the accountant. It was the change in the benefit of Xero going into their operating rhythm and workflows. So the decision maker initially was the accountant, and the accountant then would make the decision to change all of their customers in one go. So we got 1,000 business owners on with one sale to an accountant, whereas there are different products. Let me say e-commerce, Sin 7 in e-commerce, for example, around inventory management, that will be a business owner that predominantly makes that decision. So it's a different pathway. Accountants support it, but they don't decide it. So in that situation, for that software, I'd be going to a direct channel growth versus something like Xero, which has got a different pathway to that success. And so very much look to where the decision making process is done first. And then what is the thing that is going to make that happen? So then start to just unpack back to what are the decision making processes that need to happen, what needs to be true. So it's all around, most of the time, it's human emotion and human risk decisions. And one of the things that I felt you sort of mentioned to me in some of our prep for this was, what was the difference that we had between banking and software sales? And that's been really insightful to me when you asked me that question. I had to go away and think about it. And the difference, I think, initially is that bankers, when they go down this route, there's credit risk attached to a sales decision that you don't have in software. There isn't that outcome of getting the partner channel or getting your sales process wrong that you have in banking and finance, where you have a genuine credit risk on the far end, and that really sharpens your focus. And so, what I've found in technology is they think that hardcore sales and hardcore sales methodologies and enablement will win out over time because the scope of the market is so big that you can go after. The problem is that that drives reputational damage. So when I come back to my consulting type work is I try to unpack the decision, who the end user is, and then bring it back as to what style of sales methodology are we going to use that will win out over time. And it's been really interesting just what you asked me around the style comes to what's the consequence of what you do. So it starts with human emotion, and then you look to how do you digitize or automate to get scale or cost savings as part of that growth. So the technology becomes the last equation. It's like how do we do it at the end? It's not the beginning of the process. I don't sit there and go, we're going to take an automated journey. It's more, how do we automate the journey we want to do to gain cost effectiveness?
Yeah.
So it doesn't start with let's implement HubSpot. Just doesn't start there.
David, I couldn't agree more. I mean, like we work with a lot of businesses that come to us saying that our technology is not working, HubSpot's not working, and when we start to scratch below and dig a bit deeper, 9 times out of 10, it's because they've gone to a builder without engaging an architect or an engineer. Right? They don't have any blueprints. They rushed in. They start using the technology. They're all excited because they're like, I've got this amazing shiny tool. I've just dropped a lot of money on it. I want to make sure I start getting some return on investment on it. But they skip I'd say the most important stage, which is actually doing a lot of this thinking and this strategic work to understand the customer journey, your go-to-market motions, how are people going to interact with you, what do they really care about, and that is like, that old expression of like slow down to go fast, I think is extremely true when it comes to this, and we see it all the time. So I couldn't agree with you more.
So two things out of that. So slow. Let me just take it back to the early stages of the consulting journey is, and also where I think technology scaling companies just need to be cautious. Is their own. So I've become quite obsessed with Steve Bartlett, unfortunately, at the moment, and the Diary of a CEO, and actually I've been really enjoying, because it's been a really good wake up to me, just again his book of the 33 Laws of Business and Life, and one of the bits he talks about in there is culture, multiple other bits, but it's culture, and it was really amazing being both at Commonwealth Bank ASB, but I was also with National Australia back in the early 2000s when culture was really bad, right? There was loads of issues with National Australia Bank back in the early 2000s when I was there. Yes, I'm that old. You can probably tell, but so I've been part of a culture that was bad. Commonwealth Bank was a really quite progressive, service orientated banking culture, and then Xero was just next level. So I mean, going to Xero was, I knew it would be really different. I went there because it was really different. But what I never appreciated is that depth of culture. And Steve Bartlett sort of articulates it in the tech world as, or early stage businesses world, as culture and the concept of a cult. And we called Xero the Blue Church. And it's that depth of belief from the team around the purpose, the values in particular, um, creates a level of discretionary effort that I don't think can be achieved anywhere else. Um, and you wear the brand with pride. Most people do not wear the logo of the business they work for with necessarily with pride. You go to any tech firm, or even scaling early stage business, the people employed tend to be really invested in the brand of the business, and so that creates this amazing hype. The downside of it is they skip steps. So back to where you talked about, they go, right, everyone's got to have a CRM, everyone's got to do this. I know how to do a digital channel. I've done it before. I've read this book. Yeah, that's where they catch themselves out. Their hype takes them too far, too fast. They get caught up in the belief of their own product is invincible, that anybody that touches it or sees it will want it. And what that means is they waste money, time, and effort, and they actually blow relationships really early in market, because they come in hot and, I was going to say hot and horny, but it's probably not the right way to put it. But they come in real hot, and actually they don't understand the decision making process of the audience, and they're quite disruptive, and they make people afraid. If they were to slow down, take some time to understand all of those different steps and how their ICP might fit into the decision making process, they can then build the support tools in the sales enablement to support it. So rather than implementing HubSpot, Salesforce, insert CRM, or other enablement capability and then not getting the value out of it, they build it to what they actually need. And so I think you and I are saying that, sometimes going slow actually is going fast, and taking time to try things out, fast fail real quick, do old school methodologies that may be less digitally engaged and less cool at the time might be the way forward. Take your time to understand um, impacts from other industries that you can bring into yours. So be really open and objective rather than monoline. And I would say that's where I see most people around sales enablement and scaling businesses get it wrong.
Mm. Yeah, you said it really well. Um, David, I guess like from the current macro environment that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
you've observed businesses that generally fall into potentially one or two camps, which is doing too much or doing too little. Which of those failure modes do you think is more common, and how do you course correct without losing momentum?
So doing too much, I think, is the most common. Um, Doing too little, I think, is the most fatal. All right, so let me elaborate what that means. So when you're in that sort of hype cycle that I talked about within a culture, and in early scaling businesses, um, you get huge engagement from your team, you get huge energy and discretionary energy, and people work genuinely hard. It's around working smart. They get busy real quick. So loads of leads they think is good. Who can I call really good. So they just slam their networks. And so they get real busy real fast rather than taking the time to really understand that ICP, who that should target, leveraging the data and tuning real fast. So quickly iterating to find the right tuning of what you want to go rather than just doing. And that leads to both product development in my mind, sales enablement and sales strategy. So it's your go-to-market development, it's your strategic development, it's your product development as you get caught up in doing and shiny shit. And so I've seen it so many times is where you just have too much on the plate, but it feels good because you're doing stuff and it's all cool. Right. And so doing too much will distract you, but you'll still probably make some progress. Um, Doing too little is where you get to sort of overanalysis, and it usually occurs. It's not because it's not laziness doing too little. It's not necessarily even bad behavior because you can pick out the person who's the bad egg that might just not be doing what you want them to do. It's 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 capability blocks. It's analysis indecision or paralysis, the use of that language that comes through. It may be a genuine capacity constraint because you are focused and you just have not got that. And so I think that if you don't make a decision, you're not actually giving yourself it is a no decision and you can't then move forward. So everyone thinks by slowing making no decision you're actually protecting the business. I think it's actually a more fatal outcome. And you'd be better off trying something small at scale and creating an answer than you would be overanalyzing a piece of data yet again based on no renewed information or assumption. And so what I think the best thing to do is at that point is to, if you're in a cautious culture, is just to go and do something small and find something out that's definitive. But it's helping people get to that point. So being busy, you'll make some progress, but you're probably unstructured and unfocused, and you're not getting return on value, and your CAC will start to blow out, etc. And you'll start annoying people in market. Doing nothing, I think, is strategic failure.
Mm. And I think it's never been easier for businesses to run these small experiments, right? You
Yeah.
know, to be able to launch whatever it could be, like a new service line or a new product, build a landing page, even potentially like vibe code something that could deliver value to a customer pretty quickly. Like running these micro experiments and then either failing fast and learning or getting wins on the board is I think this culture that a lot more businesses are going to need to take on.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree with you more. But I'll give you two examples. A client of mine vibe coded a full CRM extension into an operating platform in 3 months over this Christmas. Like phenomenal. And whilst he has deep experience in the segment that he's in, and whilst he works in a technology business and understands technology, he's never built a CRM system. He's never built effectively an operating platform that, if you and I were to describe it, would be a combination of Salesforce, Asana, and potentially even into Xero or something like that. And so, quite an extensive build that he did. But what he did is he got it done in 3 weeks, and it allowed him to get into market rather than try to grapple with accurately deploying Salesforce, HubSpot, Pipedrive, you name it, right? And it didn't do initially everything he wanted to do, and he didn't know how to string it and integrate multiple software SaaS systems that would give him an operating model that he needed. So he just vibe coded it all in Lovable over 3 weeks. Is that a sustainable platform? I don't know. But what it's allowed him to do is move forward and learn and get into market with something that works for him today. So, is that for everybody? I don't know. But if it's not, then get somebody who can help you do it quickly and actually get definitive learning. So, what he's getting out of that is genuinely actionable information around his operating platform and how he can go to the customer base he was wanting in the way that he needs to go. Just to me, it was sensational. At the smaller level, something that we did when we were building an insights platform myself, when I was acting as a CEO in a startup, was we weren't sure whether dashboards and graphical dashboards were the way forward to deliver information. And so we actually just took dashboards out on laminated card and took them into customers with their information on it and produced graphs or diagrams, you name it, charts, and gave them a pen to write on the laminate and go, okay, what's the most interesting thing on this dashboard to you here? And then what was your next action? And what we found when it came to us trying to both do a sales enablement and product development journey is people didn't understand what you thought they understood, and they certainly didn't know what to do next, even if they did. So business owners know what they have set up their business to achieve really well. Business owners tend to not know how to run a business. So if you put information in front of them, whether it be stuff out of Salesforce, stuff out of an e-commerce system, you name it, any SaaS product that you have today, just remember that most people don't know how to use the information you produce, even if they use it properly. And so if you can't help them get to that next level, they won't see the value in your product over time. And so we really understood that and had to help with financial definitions on terms like even as simple as gross profit. And again, if you listen and read that book by Steve Bartlett, he talks about an interview with Richard Branson where he got taken out of a board meeting because one of the board members had recognized within the meeting he didn't understand the difference between gross and net profit. And he got taken out, and Branson said, no, I don't. I'm not financially literate, but I know how to run companies and I have someone to do that. So they need help, and you need to make sure you understand that or they don't see value. But if Branson doesn't know that, you can assure that a lot of people don't know that.
It's a good reminder, isn't it? You know, you see these people that have built massive empires, billionaires that are, highly successful, and everyone's got their flaws, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, we need to really lean into that. Most people start a business because they have a passion and can see that they can, usually it's because they can help someone. That's actually where most businesses start. You have the ruthless entrepreneurs that are just about making profit, but most people do it to try to help solve a problem, and but they don't necessarily know how to run the business. And if we don't come in there with the right answer to that, they won't see the value in what you do.
Yeah, awesome. So, David, with AI making inroads and I guess reshaping how go-to-market teams are operating, like driving a lot of efficiency, we're seeing this regularly with our customers. You've talked about this concept of progress over perfection when it comes to adoption. What would you see, in your opinion, is I guess the biggest practical gains that businesses can see today?
So when I was with the accounting and advisory firm I was with recently, we just encouraged people to start using the same, like everybody, just start using ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot. Didn't matter as long as it was done securely and safely for customer data or your own business data. It does not matter, but get your people starting to understand what it can and can't do. And I think at the most basic level, we're all just seeing it accelerate at quite an impressive level. Um, it's amazing what it can do, but there are a lot of people who are scared because they don't want to put the wrong information in or they don't trust where the information is going to go. And so, from a mass population perspective, um, it's really important that you create a safe environment for them to play and not have a consequence of getting it wrong, and then starting to just push and push and push, right? Because I think we can all find that even at the simplest level, it does an amazing amount of stuff. It doesn't need to be an agentic workflow to create value today. So I think the progress over perfection starts with, you can get slide decks built in 3 minutes now if you load up the right information into the system around brand structures and what you're looking to try and get. So, at the most basic level, that is what you're getting. And you don't even need to buy, something like Canva to get it done any longer. This is where the disruptions come in. Claude will build you a pretty decent slide deck in a very little amount of time. So that cost saving of enabling people to do more with your existing structure, to me, is the value immediately. So just get it going and get it into a safe structure within your business, whatever business that is, whether it's sales or not, so that your data is protected and and they understand what to do. So that then leads to, do you need to hire new people when people leave, or do you need to fire people to get their extended benefit? And I think there, if you look at where people like Google are starting to talk, that they probably overfired their staff in 2023 because they thought everything could be vibe coded or using AI to deliver on that. And they're now finding that it's not quite delivering to the right standards and they're almost having to hire back. I would just have a bit of a sinking lid policy on your hiring and not go too crazy up front unless you've genuinely proven your capability outright. So should you be pushing into agentic workflows? Yes, that's absolutely where it's going. Get people to help you to do that. But just then make sure that you understand two things is if you do lose those people, how do you get them back? And secondly, the people that you keep are usually now going to be the experienced people versus the young people. The young people, unfortunately, don't have the experience to drive the insight out of the agentic workflows. And so, actually, what you're seeing in the more progressive firms is it's the people with 5, 7, 10 years experience are being the ones that are retained, and we're not hiring graduates. The problem that you've got with that is how are you going to get succession planning of those people as they leave? So how are we going to educate people to be able to drive the insight off an AI agentic workflow? And that I think is still actually unsolved, but it's a genuine risk you need to think about today. I think for down the track is where's your own human. I am still maybe the wrong person going to be wrong, but I don't believe in 3 to 5 years humans won't be around at all to do this. Everyone's saying 99% of jobs will be gone by 2027 or whatever. If that's the case, we've got a bigger problem in the world, to be honest with you, and none of what we're talking about today will be relevant. It's and so I'm not going to get down that yet, but that's to me where if you want to keep humans in an AI loop, get them going, then work out your who's right, but then work out if they're right. And I see them being more the experienced people. How to train people to be experienced people. So those are the 3 steps that I see that need to be worked on today.
Yeah, I love it. And I think like that point you made before around the value in having someone in a company for a long time is definitely true, though with the ability to write skills in Claude and to be able to essentially kind of extract a lot of that knowledge and that IP, it's not going to be the same as having, that person sitting in a seat. But I think like we're starting to see a world where we can move into a space where, you can actually document and codify knowledge from a highly experienced worker and then systemize that with AI to allow that to be transferable to others.
Yeah, and I agree. And once we get past the hallucination risk stage, which is rapidly being taken out, but it's still there, and I still come across it where you need to interrogate the data and know where it's wrong. So yes, that's getting better, but yes, it still happens. So it's making sure that the person that is coming through understands what to look for. So if you've got experience, like you've got extensive experience in sales enablement and sales technology, right? And so if you're putting something into Claude and asking for it to give you an answer, you know where it's gone wrong. And to go back to the likes of Deloitte getting pulled up for, representing AI-driven activity, if you're a business and you're relying on people that don't have experience at the moment to deliver something that's completely AI-driven, your risk is you lose integrity and trust instantaneously.
Mm.
So that's the risk. If you want to take that risk today, go for it. And it's genuinely getting better. Let's be clear. But if you misrepresent something that is of value and it's not of value because you've taken hallucinated AI content, you lose trust day one, especially in the roles that you and I play in, mate. We're gone.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I think that is the risk. People become a little bit lazy and they just expect that the AI is going to do the right thing when all you need to do is, I think this principle that I learned from Dan Martell of 10-80-10, of
Yeah.
essentially like the 10% brief up the front, being really clear around your expectations about what the outcome is. The 80% can be done by someone else in a mixture of AI, and then spending that last 10% at the end, going the last mile to make sure that the output is true, reflective, and actually is what you intended it to be.
100%. Everyone said we're all going to become prompt engineers, and yes, we are. And eventually the data will become so good that you don't need to check the back end. But at the moment you do. And if you skip that point or don't have the experience to interpret that data or critique that data, that critical thinking layer is still very, very important, and as important in my mind as the prompt engineering up front today. Now, what does that look like in 1 year, 2 years down the track? It's going to be better, but I think it's still going to be there. And I think that's where the value comes in, is not just in the prompt engineering, but is in the critique.
Yep, agreed.
But again, AI will pick up on parts of that.
Definitely. David, really appreciate you spending time with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure and been an enthralling conversation. If people want to connect with you, follow along, kind of understand more about what you're doing today, where is the best place for them to do that?
So part of Collective Competence. It's a small business strategic execution consultancy orientated out of New Zealand, but I've got clients offshore, for example, in the UK, that are implementing growth strategies into Australia and beyond. So it's not limited to just where I'm living. And so look at Collective Competence, or it's just david.bell@collectivecompetence.com. So I'd love to get an email from you if you're looking to have a discussion and maybe how I can help. So I appreciate that, Kieran.
Pleasure. David, thank you again. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale. If you enjoyed the show, it would really be appreciated if you can leave a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcasts. And while you're there, why not subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes? If you'd like to learn about how to drive profitable scale in your business, gain clarity on your direction, and improve your business valuation, click the link in the show notes to connect with Kieran.